Hello and welcome to the first episode of the CANZUK Podcast. I'm your host Daniel, and you can follow me on Twitter at Daniel_TBCC, and you've also got Laurence.
And you can follow me at Laurence_TBCC.
You can tell it's our first podcast because there was a slight little bit of delay there. Maybe Laurence will get the hang of his cue timing in the future. But anyway,
probably not.
Yeah, no, probably not. So we've previously done podcasts and we did it for the broadcast check. It was more general stuff. This podcast series is going to be specifically about the CANZUK movement and trying to bring it to fruition because it's a really good potential policy, and I think it would benefit all of the countries involved. So we're going to talk to people from Canada, we're going to talk to people from New Zealand, Australia, the UK, and get what their perspective is on the agreement. So our first episode, we're just going to skip straight into it. We've got an interview with Tony Clement. He's a former Canadian Member of Parliament. And it's really, really good. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. We're bringing on our first guest, who's a former member of the Canadian Parliament, host of And Another Thing podcast with Jodie Jenkins, and also host of the Boom and Bust on the News Forum, Tony Clement. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation. It's nice to be here.
Yes, great. You're our first guest. Did you know?
Oh,
that?
wonderful.
Yeah, your first guest. It's a new podcast coming, which is trying to support the CANZUK movement and get it finally a thing, really. So yeah, we appreciate you being here because you seem to be a very busy man. So
well, there's a lot going on post-politics. I was very busy in politics. I was a Minister of the Crown, Minister of Industry, what we called President of the Treasury Board,
Wow.
which was kind of like the Chief Operating Officer of government, and I was Minister of Health. So obviously during these COVID times, very interested in how we respond to that. But I also am a big fan of your movement and have always supported it during my time in government and the Stephen Harper government and post-government as well.
Fantastic. So yeah, we're going to give you a few questions. The way it will do it is we'll give you a few questions about CANZUK, and then we'll ask you some more generic questions about two countries and politics in general. And then we'll finish on, people see politicians as essentially robots. They don't see them as actually they're human beings as well. So we'll finish on some nice little personal questions to get to know you a bit better as well.
Sure.
So yeah, the first question is going to be, obviously, why do you support the agreement? What benefits do you see?
I see this really as a really important movement because this represents, I think, the best opportunity for like-minded countries with the same, obviously, language skills, the same liberal democratic views, and patterns that really fit in quite nicely. And, you know, there's a lot of trading blocks in the world, and Canada is part of those. We have our agreement with Europe. We have our NAFTA agreement with the United States. We're part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We just signed an agreement with a post-Brexit agreement with the UK to be the start of a deeper agreement in the post-Brexit world. All of those things are important, but I don't think that means that you stop looking for better and deeper trade links. And to me, when you look at, you know, there's a lot of problems in trade these days. Trade with China. Oh, well, you know, there's an issue with the Uyghurs, obviously.
Yeah,
there's
really
an
bad.
issue with Hong Kong. There are things that make it difficult to trade with China with good reason.
Yeah.
So I'm actually part of a movement in Canada as well, looking at Canada's supply chain and saying, you know, it's too intermingled right now with China. And you look at very critical aspects of our economy, PPE supply chain. It became very clear that China was a bottleneck when it came to the personal protective equipment needed during a pandemic. Rare earth elements. If you want to have electric cars, if you want to have sustainable energy in the future, you need these rare earth elements. And China has over 80% of the supply chain wrapped up in rare earth elements. If you want semiconductor chips, again, the Chinese supply chain becomes an impediment. So really what's happening is people are reimagining supply chains. And to me, that also is a very good argument for the CANZUK movement, because it is a different supply chain. And you just have to ask our cousins in Australia what it's like having the behemoth of China next door, not buying their wine, not trading with them because they dared. Heaven forfend, Australia wanted to know how the virus happened. Yeah. And the Chinese government, I'm saying the government, not the Chinese people, very different, but the Chinese government took offense and are even more than wrapping the knuckles of the Australians. They're trying to make Australian life miserable, quite frankly. So that's that supply chain issue. So we have to reimagine our supply chains, and what better place to do that than with people of a like-minded history, these cultural links, these language links, these political links, these diplomatic links, and that's what CANZUK represents to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a really good point there, is that trade with China is it's kind of morally bad because of what they get up to, and knowing about sweatshops and stuff like that, having the links between the UK and Canada, Australia, New Zealand. We don't run factories like that. I think it's all about moral as well. It's not just as simple as we want to share the stuff around.
No, and there's accountability. Quite frankly, you and I can't say without any fear of contradiction that every company in our jurisdiction does everything perfectly. No. But here's the difference. They're accountable. Yeah. Somebody can call a company to account. There is a legal process, a due process. We have due process in our countries. We have the rule of law in our countries. These are things that are missing, unfortunately, in authoritarian China right now. So all of which is to say there has to be an alternative. And what's happening in the world right now is this decoupling effort. I mentioned semiconductors and microchips earlier. Brand new factories being built in the US, brand new factories being built in Taiwan, so they don't have to rely on the Chinese supply chain. Rare earth elements, there's a movement between Canada and the US, I'm sure Australia is involved as well, looking at supply chains to supply green energy of the future that is not strangled by the Chinese supply chain. So these things are happening. And so I really think that this has been talked about for many years, but I believe that it really is important in the post-pandemic and the post-Brexit world to get these things going.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I was going to ask, what do you think the benefits are for the Canadian residents? But I kind of think you've answered that. Well, actually, how do you think it would directly benefit the residents?
Yeah, I mean, I obviously you want more jobs, more opportunity for people. You want trade links that are not potentially disrupted by geopolitical considerations, and that's always the problem with the Chinese supply chain. And so consequently, it can be a genuine free trade and global trade movement that fits into our more general views of human rights, environmental rights and obligations. These are things, I'm an old guy, okay? I just turned 60 this year, but it's very clear that millennials and Gen Zers are that they want more. If you say to them, global trade is a good in and of itself, I would accept that argument. I would, because that's the world that I grew up in. But I think millennials and Gen Zs are looking for more. They say, okay, yeah, it may be good for me, but what does that mean for the underage shop worker? What does that mean for the Uyghur? What does it mean for the Democrats in Hong Kong? Just to name a few. But this could be an issue in other countries as well. So I do believe that you do want to have trade relationships that, all things being equal, are better connected to your values. It just makes trade a lot easier. it can be politically supportable. And as a former politician, I can tell you that trade agreements are always controversial. And so consequently, I really think that this is the time for the CANZUK movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in England, obviously, we're getting more support for CANZUK. We're seeing that. Do you see it as possible with the current government in Canada, or do you think that the Conservatives need to be in charge for it to be passed?
Yeah, I'm not very happy with, obviously I'm a conservative, so I'm not very happy with the Trudeau government at the best of times, and these aren't the best of times. But they really haven't shown very much interest. Even the Canada-UK post-Brexit patch-up, because it really is just a patch-up for now, and that's fine. That's a step in the right direction, and I applauded it when they got that done. It was almost with Mr. Trudeau, well, yeah, I guess we got to do this, and I got other things on my mind. There was no real vision involved with it. So I believe, though, that this is part of the DNA of the Conservative Party of Canada. And it's been something that the Conservative Party has talked about for a long time. And now you've got Aaron O'Toole as the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's got one of his best friends is Daniel Hannan. Yep. You may know Daniel Hannan. And Daniel has been talking about CANZUK for years and years when he was an MEP. Big
supporters, aren't they?
Big supporter. Hannan's a big supporter. He writes about it. He advocated for it. He was a Brexiteer. So he was, when he was advocating for Brexit, he saw this as part of his vision for the post-UK world. When people would say, we can't live without Europe, we have to be in Europe, there is no alternative, Daniel would say, aha, there is an alternative, and part of it is CANZUK. So Daniel and Aaron are very tight. They talk to each other a lot, and there's actually a very close connection between the UK Conservative Party apparatus and the Canadian Conservative Party. So I think that should Aaron win the next election, which may be forthcoming, we've got what we call a minority parliament right now, what you call a hung parliament. So there could be an election this spring. There could be an election, if not this spring, then in the fall. Yeah. Then this will be something that Aaron will be talking about for sure.
With touching on Brexit, how do you think it can avoid becoming another European Union?
Well, I mean, I think that CANZUK is not about political union, right? And the thing about right from the beginning with the European Economic Community back in the 50s, Jean Monnet, I don't know if you know that name, but he was one of the big brains in France. And there was a certain logic to the initial understanding of what the European community was going to be. It was a post-war construct to make sure that Germany and France never fought one another again.
Yeah, to be pals. Yeah,
I mean, it just destroyed the world a couple times over. So they thought that this was the solution. But then you get, as we've seen with Europe, this concept of ever closer union, right? The common market wasn't good enough. There had to be more political ties and more military ties, more bureaucratic ties and more regulatory ties. And oh my gosh. And it became, in my view, as an outside observer, unwieldy. And that drove the Brexit movement in the UK, most people in the UK would have agreed with an economic trade relationship. But when all these other things were added in, people started to get squeamish. Yeah. But the CANZUK is not about that. It's not about political union or, some of us are, all of us are military allies, but on our own terms. We're diplomatic allies, but we believe in our own sovereignty as individual nations. So it really is a different construct than the EU, and it would never have that aspect to it, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think there's the concern that could one country kind of take over and be in full control. You want it split between all countries, because that was the problem with the EU, is that Germany and France seem to kind of be the controllers of it and get a kind of more dictate down onto the other countries. Do you think that can be avoided with this, because it's not too political? It's more about trade and movement.
Yeah, look, as I say, we have a lot of common values. We have parliamentary democracies. We either have, I guess,
similar government structure, isn't it?
Same head of state. There's a similarity there, but there's also, I believe, a love of sovereignty that people should be able to make decisions based on their local political representatives, and I don't think that would ever go away.
No, yeah, that's fair. That's good.
Just move.
Oh, carry on.
Oh, sorry.
No, you carry on.
I was just going to move off topic slightly. I was going to talk about sort of COVID. In the UK, we've had over, I think it's 127,000 deaths now from COVID. Slowly, obviously, we're getting it under control with the success of the vaccine rollout. But what are your how has it been in Canada, sort of with the COVID sort of things? And what's your views on the vaccine passports? Because it's quite split over here.
Yeah, I just got my first vaccine today, actually.
Yay.
So I'm all in favor of vaccine passports now. No, I'm just kidding. So Canada, as usual, this is a similar story for Canada. We're kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
We're not the best jurisdiction on COVID. We're not the worst jurisdiction on COVID. We've had 22,000 deaths and 1 million cases.
Wow.
Australia had 1,800 deaths. So, and you have to understand, we're the mouse that lives next door to the elephant. Okay. Yeah. So everything we view is viewed through the prism of what's happening in the United States of America, always.
Yes.
So when you say to a Canadian, Australia had 1,800 deaths, we had 22,000 deaths, what does that tell you? A Canadian will answer immediately, and I say this without any fear of contradiction, well, it's certainly better what happened in the United States, where they had 500,000 deaths, right? So that's their prism. Now, interestingly, of course, UK is a fine example, Israel is a fine example, and the US is a fine example of rolling out the vaccine.
Yeah.
And Canada is 50th in the world when it comes to vaccination per 100 people.
Is that logistical, or is it because of not putting in the orders?
Okay, it's a number of things. So Mr. Trudeau, get this, his big plan, 8 months ago for vaccine was to do a partnership with the People's Republic of China. That was his grand. Yeah. So how did that work out? I'll tell you how it worked out. China, who doesn't like us anyway, they've got 2 of our citizens under arrest in trumped up spy charges because we arrested the executive from Huawei. So China said, "Oh yeah, we'd love to partner with you." So then we put our eggs in that basket. Yeah. No eggs going in any of the basket. And then China said, "Oh, by the way, we no longer want to work with you. Go away." So that left Trudeau hot and dry. And then he went to Pfizer and AstraZeneca and Moderna and said, "Hey, hi, we're Canadian. Hi." They say, "Yeah, join the back of the line. We got like 80 countries ahead of you."
Yeah.
So while everyone else was rolling out their vaccination January, February, we had nothing. And so finally we're getting millions of doses as of this week. And Trudeau took a lot of criticism for the poor vaccination rollout, but it'll eventually, again, Canada will muddle through while the UK is opening up with the pubs and the snooker championships and the FA Cup and blah, blah, blah. And the Texas Rangers played in Arlington, Texas to a full stadium against the Toronto Blue Jays the other night. That's all great. Meanwhile, we may get to 70% vaccination in September. So, it's not and meanwhile, we've got a huge surge in cases because the B117 English variant is running rampant through Vancouver and Toronto and places like that. And it's the young people who are getting hit now, because the old people, if you're over 70, you've probably been vaccinated now.
Yeah.
But if you're under 70 in Canada, but if you're under 70, you haven't. And it's running rampant right now. So people are afraid right now. The general thing is we're not looking ahead post COVID because people are afraid of the variant and whatnot. So I don't think it's a particularly good story, but most people, again, it's like having a crazy neighbor south of the border. And, that's what we had for 4 years. And so people are saying, well, at least it's not like Trump's America. That's good enough for most Canadians.
But then it's not actually taking into effect what's happening in the country, is it?
No, I don't think it's a real, you're not looking at it realistically as to a lot of people who suffered. We had 1 million cases of COVID here. Didn't have to be that way.
Because they got a lot of deaths, but they've also now got a lot of the vaccine rollout. They've vaccinated a lot of people, where it's been the opposite I think it's been the opposite for a lot of countries, isn't it? The ones with the most deaths have kind of vaccinated the most people now, whereas the people who didn't have many deaths have struggled with the vaccination process.
It is odd that way. I mean, obviously the US has they've got some great pharmaceutical companies, and Boris was very smart with the Oxford-AstraZeneca partnership. So some, leadership does matter, and we didn't really get that. But I would have to say, in all honesty, despite my frustrations, the Trudeau government is not really paying a price in terms of popular support.
No,
and so on.
We don't hear anything about it here. It doesn't reach our media. We don't hear negative stuff about him. I mean, when the photos of him fully black-faced up, like that hardly reached here as well.
I was actually in Manchester when that story broke. I was at the Conservative Party conference in Manchester.
Oh, were you?
Oh, right.
I go every year or every other year just to see what's going on within the Conservative movement and more internationally. And when that story broke, I thought, okay, we're going to bring this guy down. And
no one seems to care. No one seems to care about it.
He got away with it because people give him the benefit of the doubt. And so the media also helps with that in Canada, unfortunately. But anyway, it is what it is. And Aaron O'Toole's going to run a great campaign. I have no doubt of that. We're going to have some really interesting ideas in our manifesto, as you call it. We call it a platform. I have this adage from being in politics since I was 14 years of age in some manner. And that is campaigns matter. Yes. So you can do all your prognostications and Starmer's got this going against him in the UK right now. Oh, he's done. He's finished. You never know. Campaigns matter.
Never write them off.
I don't know. They're a split party at the moment, so there's a bit of a struggle. You got the momentum side, and then you got the more central side. And there's a big struggle internally with them.
No, that's absolutely true. But you definitely need unity within any political organization. If you don't have that, it's not gonna be good for you.
And you need a strong opposition. You need a strong opposition, regardless, to hold the current government to account, because they're the only ones who have the ability to do so. So even if you don't like the opposition, you still want them to be strong and united.
I read a really good biography. I've read probably 15 biographies of Churchill, of course. But I read a really good biography last year on Attlee, and it really, I didn't know much about him except that he beat Churchill right at the tail end of the war. Yeah. Here, a very interesting cat. I mean, he was deputy prime minister during the war years. So Churchill ruled the roost, but Attlee was the deputy prime minister as the labor leader, and he was a patriot. He loved his country. Mm-hmm. He hated the fascists. He thought going to war was the right thing to do. It was a virtuous war, and he wasn't afraid of putting British soldiers in harm's way if it meant defeating the scourge of Hitler.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get that from Labour these days. You know, they were upset that the British flag was behind a cabinet minister when they were in an interview. You know,
it says too patriotic, didn't they? That's what they said.
Clement Attlee would have said, "What are you talking about? You know, that's the flag. We're patriots.
It's the country's flag, isn't it?
There's a cultural thing going on there.
It's people see it to be wrong to be proud of your country,
right?
And it's a shame that it's gone that way, because you should always be proud of your country.
See, the thing is, like in Canada, here's an interesting little tidbit for you. The Liberal Party of Canada was always seen as the patriotic party of Canada until Justin Trudeau came along. Like, the Liberal Party of Canada created the Canadian flag in 1965. They're the ones who manufactured this brand new flag for a young country. And they're the ones who helped define sort of the attributes of Canadianness, whether it's multiculturalism or tolerant, being a tolerant society. These were all things the Liberals kind of created because of their love of country. But the new Liberal Party, and this is part of the culture wars that we're all enmeshed in these days, the new Liberal Party here in Canada, you get the sense that they are ashamed of Canada's past because of our quite frankly, we've had some things to be ashamed of, whether it's indigenous
absolutely.
people. But
every country has, haven't they? It's about learning from it.
Yeah, exactly. Learn from it, teach it, make sure it doesn't happen again, all of those things, but don't hate your country.
Yeah, because the problem is people are really fond on erasing it, but if you erase it, you don't learn from it. You have to have it there to say, look, this was bad. Everyone can accept it was bad. And this is how we moved away from it. And this is why we should never go back to that way. But everyone just wants to get rid of it, almost pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't happen. Yeah, I think it's a very dangerous aspect of the current civil debate, but hopefully we'll get to the other side of that.
Yeah,
it's what people say, isn't it? You can't change history, but you can change the future. So as long as you're doing the right in the future, that's the way forward, isn't it?
I think that's a very succinct and acceptable way to put it. Absolutely.
Have you? Carry on.
No, I was going to say, you learn from history, read different accounts of history. The British Empire was an empire. It had some attributes that we would not consider virtuous these days, but there was other things that maybe you could find that actually were very helpful. Yeah. So why not teach it all?
Well, they did help to develop the countries. Obviously, they did some atrocious things as well, but they did help develop the countries that they went to.
I would say that. I don't consider myself an occupier in Canada. I consider myself a Canadian. And in my constituency, by the way, I had a number of what we called First Nations communities, Indigenous communities. It's the large in my former constituency. It's the largest group of people outside white people. Happen to be Indigenous people, and I always held them in the highest of respect, and I always worked with them, and I worked with their leadership, and I worked with the people who taught in the schools, whoever. So that's the way forward. That we had a reconciliation commission that made a bunch of recommendations on how we could deal with the poor treatment of Indigenous people in the past. But reconciliation takes two sets. It's not just one set. It's everybody working together. Yeah. That, I think, is that's the path forward, I think.
So obviously you've been in the Canadian Parliament, and in the UK Parliament, we've seen some crazy stuff over the years. There's been a scuffle and other stuff. Has there anything crazy gone on in the Canadian Parliament?
Oh yeah, I've seen some crazy.
Any fights?
Yeah, we did actually. There was a time we were just new in opposition. We had just lost government, and Justin Trudeau was the new prime minister, and I was on the front bench of the opposition. And they were trying to stuff through a change in our parliamentary procedures that basically would have meant they could have run roughshod over over the opposition at any time they wanted. Like it was taking away all the tools the opposition had to slow down bills and so on. So we raised a ruckus, and we were chanting, and we were slamming desks, and we were objecting. And Justin Trudeau got so mad that I watched it. He stood up from his place in Parliament, waltzed across, and was trying to force our whip to get to his seat, because our whip was dawdling before a vote, and in the process hit a female member of Parliament in the chest with his elbow.
Really?
Wow.
So it was immediately called Elbow Gate, of course.
Yeah.
But and then he refused to admit that he did anything wrong. And she was an NDP member of Parliament, which is like your Labour Party. Yeah. So she rose on a point of privilege, and finally, the Prime Minister had to apologize 3 times in order to get out from under that. But it was bedlam. It was really a crazy scene on the floor of the chamber. So I've seen things like that, and I've seen amazing moments. We like you have guest visitors. We had President Obama. We've had
wow.
Speaking on the floor of our House of Commons, we've had freedom fighters. I think of people from Asia, people from South America, you name it. So that's always been very interesting. One of the famous speeches of Churchill was in 1943 from the floor of the Canadian House of Commons.
Yes, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Some chicken, some neck was the byline, so there's a lot of history there. When I was there, just to be in that chamber, and I remember David Cameron. He also made a speech from the floor of our Commons, and our Commons is quite large, and it has a very high ceiling. It's many stories high, with a lot of stained glass and stone and woodwork. And I remember when David Cameron walked in with Prime Minister Harper to take his seat to the right of the speaker, when Harper was going to introduce him and he was going to do his speech. And Cameron walked in, and then I saw his jaw drop, because he was used to the British House of Commons, which is very cloistered.
It is, and very enclosed.
Cameron was looking around, looking at the ceiling, and I could almost see the wheels turning, going, man, this is a real House of Commons here. So that was a kind of an interesting moment.
So obviously it's hotter in Canada than it is here. So do you have a dress code in Parliament and that, or can you rock up in shorts and flip flops into Parliament, or?
No, we can't. Although it is getting a little bit less formal, but members are still required to wear jackets and ties, and female members of Parliament are expected to wear a blouse and a jacket. So it's still that. There's other aspects of life in Canada. Business life, for instance, is a lot more casual, and it'll be interesting to see as more millennials and Gen Zers get into Parliament. Maybe it'll be more casual, but so far, I think there is a modicum of a standard there in terms of dress.
Because over here, I was going to say, over here, there's so much tradition in Parliament and courts and things like that. I mean, as a voter, I don't really care as long as they're doing their job. I don't care if they're wearing shorts and a t-shirt or whatever they're wearing, as long as they're doing their job. But there seems to be so much tradition.
The problem is they can be really dressed up nicely and still not doing their job. So
exactly, that's right. Yeah.
Well, we don't wear the white wigs. I must say that. That's gone. And when we have all-night votes, I think things go a little bit looser. So some members would be wearing jeans along with their jacket and their shirt. But so that's kind of acceptable now. But there still is a standard. And I think that's right. You are representing your voters, and it should be a respectable job.
Yeah, I agree. So there's a lot of similarities between our countries, but there's a few differences. I think of one is when it snows, what happens in Canada?
You just carry on.
Oh, no. It's not like that here.
Here it's a snow day, isn't it? You get
There's
time
a
off work
centimetre of snow and you're like, can't go to work.
No, we usually, where I am, I'm north of Toronto right now in Muskoka. The region is called Muskoka. It's like our Lake District.
Yeah.
Be like the Cotswolds for you. So in my constituency, which represented this district, I have 8,000 freshwater lakes. And it's the district is the size of Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's about 15,000 square kilometers, just to give you a sense of it. And typically we get around 18 feet of snow in the wintertime. So it's a little bit of snow. So you have to get used to
about maybe a chunk like that down the southwest, a bit more in
we
the
get
north.
That about every 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
that's
So
incredible.
the ice just melted on the lake behind me, and so we're getting ready for warmer weather finally.
Yeah. About time.
So,
no.
I was going to say, so you mentioned that you come to Manchester quite a bit. What is it that you like most about the UK, and is there anything you miss when you go back to Canada?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. When I was in Manchester, I'll tell you a story at the last party conference. So that would have been in 2019. And I made sure there was a day when United was playing at Old Trafford. So I went to see a match there. I got my tickets before I left. That was no issue. And
Who
then
were they playing?
Was that?
Who were they playing?
I think it was Queen's Park Rangers, but don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was an easy game, but
we wouldn't say that anymore.
As you can tell, I like my music. I play guitar, and so I was, I was going to the events at the conference, and I thought, gee, it would be nice to know if there's a concert going on while I'm here. So I did a little bit of searching, and right next to the conference hall, which is the old railway station in Manchester, there's an old venue. And anyway, the Psychedelic Furs were playing the night I was there. So I just bought a ticket, no problem. I went to the ticket booth 5 hours before the show, bought a ticket for, I don't know, £30 or something ridiculously inexpensive. And I got to see the Psychedelic Furs live in a British venue. It was like the best night of my life at the conference, because I was just I
weren't at the conference.
Yeah, exactly. But so these kinds of things can happen when I'm there, and I always look for an opportunity to appreciate the musical influence of the UK, which has been obviously so strong with so many amazing bands over the decades. So I like that.
Yeah, I was going to comment on your guitars. You got a very nice collection behind you.
How many?
Yes.
How many have you got?
I've got about 8.
Wow.
I have guitar acquisition syndrome. So
I collect guitars. I've got about 4. But my problem is I'm not allowed to collect anymore. I have to sell one before I'm allowed to buy one. Just that's the wife's rules. So my wife changed the rules. For my birthday, which was in January, she allowed me to buy one more guitar, which is this lovely.
Ooh, is that cyan? It's got a nice color to it. Yeah.
Seafoam green.
Seafoam green. Yes.
So it just every time I play it, I feel like I'm playing surf music. So
my wife always says to me, well, how many guitars can you play at once? And my response is always, well, how many pairs of shoes can you wear at once? So, it's
exactly, my friend. Exactly. That's the way I look at it too. They're all different.
Exactly.
I used to work at Safari Park, and we had a big hot balloon festival, and we actually had a Canadian commentator who was obsessed with hot air balloons and knew everything about them, and he just was really obsessed with the seafoam green balloon. He kept going on about it. He's like, it's not in the pack of 8 Crayola, it's not in the pack of 16 Crayola, but it's in the pack of 24 Crayola, seafoam green.
There we go. Okay, I learned something new right there.
Every time I hear seafoam green, it makes me chuckle thinking about it. He's just loved it.
Aficionado. Yeah, exactly.
We're going to finish off the interview with a few personal questions, if you don't mind. Sure. So obviously we just had a few actually, but it was just going to be a bit more like, what was the reason you got into politics?
Yeah, I mean, the usual reason, which is to change the world for the better. I was an idealistic young person. I still am idealistic. It hasn't been throttled away from me yet. So I do believe that people working together can make positive changes. Yeah. And I became a conservative because Justin's dad, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, was the prime minister at the time, and very statist, and believed that there wasn't a problem that couldn't be solved by more government intrusion in people's lives. And so I reacted to that. And this was in the 70s, mid to late 70s. And so I became a conservative who believed in freedom. And it just happened to intersect with two of the greatest leaders, Thatcher and Reagan. And that really cemented it for me.
Yeah. That can be a big turning point, isn't it? Seeing some great leaders, seeing how they act compared to someone else. Certainly can change your views on different things. What advice would you give to anyone who wants to get into politics but doesn't know where to start?
I really, there's many different ways, but I really am a big fan still of starting at the bottom and working your way up. I think working in local campaigns, learning what it's like to talk to real people at their doorsteps about issues that you're passionate about. I don't think you can beat that. I think it makes you a better political leader. I think it makes you more moored in the everyday concerns of people, which is what I think you should be always focused on. So I've had people come to me, yes, I'd like to get involved in politics, but I really feel I should be a senior strategist. You don't get to be a senior strategist unless you know something about what elects people, how people are successful at the local level. So that's really a big piece of advice. And in Canada, maybe not apropos of the UK, I always advise people to learn languages because we are, we're a bilingual country. We have French and English. So it really would be helpful if you learned a little bit of French in this country's politics anyway.
It makes communication a lot more easier.
Yeah. And it's a form of respect. A lot of French-speaking Canadians can speak English, do speak English, but if you can speak to them in their mother tongue, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. So going on to a bit more about you specifically, obviously you like to play music in your spare time. What else do you do? I like to snowshoe in the winter. I do a lot of snowshoeing as a kind of a winter activity. I golf in the summer, and what's your handicap?
Oh, I rarely break 100, so it's not.
We would go well together then. That's fine.
Yeah. I'm not doing it to play on the tour. No. So I do those things, and and as you said, I've got this lovely podcast that I do with my podcast partner, Jody Jenkins. So we have a little bit of fun with that, doing that. And then I've got my media television show called Boom and Bust, which is an economic and business news and views show. So those pastimes keep me busy.
You mentioned you did a podcast. What advice have you got for us starting out on the podcast?
Biggest piece of advice is to keep at it. There's a million podcasts, but a large majority of them are 3 podcasts, then you get tired of it, right? Or whatever, life intrudes.
You have to put the grind in.
Yeah. We're at episode 75 on our podcast.
Wow.
And we did it every single week.
Yeah.
So for 75 weeks, and we didn't have any sponsors until episode 50. Yeah. So we did 50 weeks of no sponsors. Now we have 3 sponsors, so we're actually monetizing it. Which is not for everybody. You don't have to monetize it, but it'd be kind of nice to make a little bit of money when you're doing your podcast. So that my big advice to podcasters is you just have to keep at it.
And just wait. You got to expect to maybe 1 or 2 people might watch it, and it slowly builds up, and you got to be dedicated to it. Like you said, you have to do it weekly. You can't just go, we'll do it weekly, and then every other week you do it kind of thing? You got to keep at it.
No, keep at whatever schedule you come up with. It doesn't have to be weekly. It could be bi-weekly or fortnightly. That's that sense. But if you want to build an audience, they've got to know that on such and such a date they can expect another episode.
Yeah.
So you're a big music fan. What's your 3 favorite songs?
Oh my goodness!
Can you narrow it down to 3 or not?
My favorite band of all time is The Clash. So I'd probably go with Spanish Bombs, maybe, or Lost in the Supermarket. Yeah. Then I'd go with a Ramones song. There's so many good Ramones songs, but one of those. And then I'd probably go back to classic rock and maybe Gimme Shelter from the Rolling Stones. I'm really I'm rediscovering that classic with the great Mary Clayton doing the female vocals in that. Great backstory about Mary Clayton and being roused in the middle of the night by her manager. There's some blokes down at the studio, Mick and Keith, and they need a background singer. And she was like 7 months pregnant, so she went to the studio at 1:30 in the morning and just nailed it. And it's now an iconic song, quite frankly, because of the background singing in it.
That's incredible.
Can you play those songs on the guitars?
Oh, I can play pretty well any Ramones song. There's not much to it. And,
I'm okay as long as it has the same 5 chords.
Yeah, exactly.
What got you
I've
into?
Got about 3 Rolling Stones songs under my belt. So yeah, a few of the classics for sure.
What got you into rock?
I mean, rock and roll. And the ethos of punk. I'm talking the late '70s punk.
Yeah.
Is do it yourself, do it the way you want to do it. You're not confined by the mores of society. So those aspects of it, I think, are very important for my own individual expression, right? And that's why I'm a rock and roll guy, and I respect the blues, and I respect jazz, and I respect country, and I respect R&B, but I like it a little bit faster than that.
Yeah.
So
when can we expect to have the cover hits by Tony Clement then?
I actually do have a 70s and 80s covers band called the Dock Spiders.
Oh, right, wow.
But we're laid low by all the lockdowns, so I'm hoping this summer we can get back together and start doing some gigs again.
Yeah, because we had a similar thing with starting a podcast. As soon as lockdown hit, we wanted to do it in person, in studio kind of thing, but as soon as lockdown hit, it kind of limits what you can do.
Indeed.
And we've now come out and started doing it on Zoom, and it's really good. We like it.
Yeah, no, there's alternatives, but there's no alternative to live music.
No.
Live streaming, good for them.
Not the same. It's the atmosphere, isn't it? When you're there, the crowd, it all adds to it. And when you're watching it live, it's when you're watching it like on a live stream, it's good, but you need everyone else's like excitement with it, isn't it?
You need that energy. Absolutely. I completely concur.
Are you a big TV or film fan?
Yeah, one of my daughters, she's a screenwriter, so she's really big in TVs and movies. She's just starting out. But I've obviously in this lovely COVID world, I've been binge watching here and there for sure.
What series?
I'd recommend, first of all, I'll give you 2 recommendations right off the top of my head. One of them was a British show called Shetland. Have you heard of this?
Yeah.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, set in the Shetland Islands, which kind of reminds me of Newfoundland a little bit. I just love the vistas. I had to put the subtitles on, though. I couldn't understand a bloody word they were saying. But
I have that problem sometimes as well. So. Yeah.
So Shetland, and a great American production called The Leftovers. I don't know if you've heard of that one.
I've heard of that. I've not seen it as well.
Yeah, very, very impactful. I really enjoyed that. And then the best documentary I've seen there's a couple of docs that I liked. There's a documentary on Laurel Canyon. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it was basically this neighborhood of Los Angeles in the 60s that became an epicenter for Neil Young, Joni Mitchell, Dave Crosby, the Mamas and the Papas. They all lived there in the same neighborhood. And this is a documentary on that. And there's also a very famous documentary, at least here, called The Last Dance, which was a documentary about Michael Jordan and Chicago Bulls basketball team, which was basically epic because it was kind of like life. Yeah, it was basketball, but it was life. And I'd recommend that one heartily as well.
Do you get the Crown over there?
Oh yeah. My wife loves the Crown. Yes.
What's the Canadians' view then on sort of the royal family? Is it?
Do we have enough time for this?
I think that there's a generational divide. So the more elderly generation is pro our connection with the monarchy, and I think younger people less so. The interesting thing about Canada, though, is that because of the nature of our constitution and the requirement for unanimity in order to do any constitutional change, we'll stick with the Crown longer than the UK will stick with the Crown. Because there's just no way to not stick with the Crown, because you need a unanimous decision of all 10 provinces in order to change the constitutional structure of the country.
Oh, wow. So it won't be a case of, because I think there was a Guardian article that said, there was a Guardian article that said 55% of Canadians in a poll support getting rid of the monarchy. So that, regardless of how many people support it, if all your areas don't support it, they'll stay.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. So it's not, and nobody wants to expend the political capital for that, because there would be no common agreement of what to replace it with.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's a sound benefit such as CANZUK UK. There's not like, oh yeah, well, we can increase our trade, we can do this. It's a case of, we just kind of want to get rid of the monarchy.
Yeah, and then replace it with what? Because you need a referee other than the prime minister. Our prime minister has way more power than your prime minister, because he appoints all of the upper house, he appoints all of the Supreme Court, he individually, all of the lieutenant governor, who are the individual for each province, as well as the governor general. So it's to give more power to the prime minister is not really a good idea.
No, it doesn't sound it, actually. I didn't realize they also can nominate the governors. That sounds that's quite a lot of power.
Advice to the Queen, but you know, that's the way it goes now.
Laurence, what was your foods related question you were thinking of?
I did a bit of research. Is it one of the top foods in Canada? Is it poutine or I can't pronounce it. Poutine seems to be number one food in Canada.
Yeah, everybody loves poutine.
What is it?
What is it? Yeah.
Have you ever tried it?
No, what is it?
It's warm cheese curds that you put on French fries.
Oh
wait, so it's just warm cheese on fries?
Yeah, cheese curds. So it's not liquidy. It's kind of more. It's liquid and solid, and you put some gravy on it too. And it's certainly mostly more so in Quebec than anywhere else. Yeah. You can tell by the name poutine, but it's captured the imagination of other Canadians as well. So yeah, poutine's right up there.
That sounds pretty good. I wouldn't mind that.
Yeah,
I do have another question. Actually, it's probably one of the most controversial questions ever. Do you hate or do you like Marmite?
I don't. I'm not going to Marmite. No.
There we go. We're
gonna ask all our guests that question.
No, but do you like peanut butter?
Yeah, I do, and I like Marmite.
See, I'm not a massive fan of it on say just toast, but I love Reese's. I love peanut butter chocolate.
Sure. Yeah, and you can get that ice cream as well, peanut butter and chocolate ice cream.
It's delicious.
Yeah.
See, I'm weird because I used to have, when I was little, I used to have Marmite and sweet corn on toast. So that was...
That's disgusting. I think on
Everyone
that
has
note,
that
we're going to
reaction.
end this interview. I'm going to end this podcast with you full stop. This is disgraceful.
Can I defend myself?
No, we're ending it there. Thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for giving us that time. It's been a pleasure. It's been really good. And hopefully we'll get you back at some point in the future.
Well, I had a great time, guys. Thanks for the opportunity, and let's keep the conversation going for sure.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers. Well, that was a good first interview, isn't it?
It was, yeah. Are you still not going to let me defend my sweet corn and Marmite?
We're skipping straight past that. I'll end the episode right here if you're going to try and defend that. I'll let anyone defend their point of view, but that is one view that cannot be defended. We'll just skip that, all right? So anyway, back to Tony Clement. He was a nice guy, proper genuine guy.
It was.
Yeah, that was a really great interview. I think we talked about so much stuff.
Yeah, and he shares my love for guitars. So what else is there not to love?
You know what? I've never owned a guitar. I tell you, I owned a toy electric guitar that obviously you didn't actually properly strum it. You just kind of knocked one of the strings and it would make just a generic noise. It wasn't like a note noise. I've never got into it. I used to play trumpet though.
Don't you have an addiction of a different kind though, to cameras?
I love camera equipment. Yeah, that is one thing I've been restricted on, is camera equipment. But yeah, I used to play the trumpet. I started it in primary school. I wasn't very good at it, but
I played the trombone when I was in primary school.
Did you really?
And I'll tell you what, the only thing I didn't really, I thought it'd be a good instrument, but it was heavy and I had to carry it to school. But the one thing that I was glad about is once I got hit by a car, but the car hit my trombone, so that my trombone actually saved me from getting hit. So
the trombone, there's so much more effort to play it though. You gotta be like,
I should have. Yeah, and it's so heavy. I should have gone for the trumpet, but I wanted to have a big instrument.
I just like trying to play the Darth Vader theme tune on the trumpet. It was like do. Was it that one? Yeah, I think it's that one.
I was used to trumpet, but I was never good at practicing. So I was used to practice like the night before for like half an hour, and then I think my teacher could tell that I was rubbish. But because they're getting paid money to teach you, they don't really care, do they? I
always like that with a lot of stuff. It's the same with drama. I remember in like all my acting classes at school, I wouldn't know the lines until like the final, not even before the final rehearsal. I would know them just in between the final rehearsal and the actual showtime. There was a problem. I just could not remember the lines. I just kind of went with it. I did all right though. I was good at drama.
Yeah, I was told acting wasn't for everybody. So
well, now you're a face on the podcast, which is a shame because I guess you got a radio face. Is that what you were told? Oh,
sound like my father. Yeah,
yeah, a face for radio.
What's the other thing he says to me? You're not stupid, you just lack common sense. Is the other thing he said to me. So good advice there from the father.
Yeah, no, I think I'd rather be stupid than lack common sense. Because stupid is subjective. It could be about anything, but it's a lack of common sense.
Wow, there's that. Yeah,
it's a general term, isn't it? Anyway, we're getting off topic. Back to the topic at hand, CANZUK. I think more of these is something that will really benefit the movement. I think getting people to learn about it, talk about it, I think would be really good. There is a concern that will people support it in this day and age, but I think the benefits that he certainly outlaid.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think the more people can see the benefits and the more we talk about it, hopefully it'll come to fruition.
Yeah. So we're looking at doing more of these in the future. We'll get more guests on. We're going to get guests from all different, like you said, all different countries. They're not all going to be politicians. There'll be celebrities, all sorts of people. And we're also going to go out in the public and interview just the regular public on the streets. Obviously, that's COVID dependent, whether we're all going to be allowed to do that stuff. But we're looking forward to the potential of this podcast series. And if you want to see more, just hit that subscribe button on YouTube, hit the follow, hit the like, and just make sure you got your notifications turned on to never miss an episode. But anyway, for now, this has been Daniel and Laurence, and the CANZUK Movement Podcast. We'll see you next time.
Bye.